Welcome to the first episode of the First to Third podcast. My name is Kenny Swab. I'll be your host this evening. I've got 5 of my good friends, all from the great town of Kernersville, North Carolina, and we're going to sit here and just talk a little bit about baseball. So I'm going to send it to Scotty Banks. He's going to introduce himself, and then I'll let him pass it off to another guy, part of the team. Scotty, take it away.
Hey everyone, Scott or Scotty Banks, whichever one you're in the mood for that day. As Kenny said, grew up in Kernersville, graduated from Appalachian State up in the mountains, and was fortunate to play club baseball there for 4 years and participate in the 2012 Club Baseball World Series. Had the also fortunate ability to travel around the country with Cal Ripken Baseball and put on some local camps in some different areas with Robbie, who I'm sure you'll be hearing that from a little bit later. But yeah, super stoked to be talking some baseball and, chat it up with some friends. So let's see, I'll pass it over to Drew and we'll let him go next.
I'm Drew Dole. I am the eldest statesman of the 6 of us right here, as if I had a hand in coaching, I believe all of them except for Barrick. So I am the head baseball coach at the high school we all went to, East Forsyth High School. Done some camps and overseas in Germany. Did some Legion baseball. Did some travel baseball. Done a lot of this is my 7th year as the head coach at East Forsyth, and we've had some pretty successful teams, and just looking to chat up some baseball with some friends that know what the heck's going on, and we have our opinions about things, and if you like them, great. If you don't, oh well. I'm gonna pass it down to Barrick though.
What's up, guys? I'm Barrett Clifton. I learned everything I know about baseball from Baseball for Dummies, the book. It's a great read. You should check it out. Also, the only Orioles fan of the group, which means I live in a perpetual state of sadness. So, yeah, looking forward to bringing everybody down with the 100+ losses whenever that happens. I think even if the season is shortened, we're still going to lose 100+ games. I don't know how that's going to happen, but we're going to do it. So during the day, I play doctor, so when somebody gets hurt, I get excited. So, yeah, that's me. I'll throw it to Ryan.
I'm Ryan Dole. I'm the younger brother of Drew, and I've graduated, played baseball at UNC Asheville up in the mountains, and then got privileged enough to be drafted in 2012 by the Oakland A's, and then also made it up to the major leagues in 2015 and continuing still playing baseball as of right now. So I would say probably have some of the insider knowledge that we could end up sharing out for future episodes. And I will finish it with Robbie.
Hey, everybody. I'm Robbie Swab. I am Kenny's younger brother, judging by our last names. But yes, I am also a high school coach. I live and work in Charlottesville, Virginia, and coach here in the area. I've coached in a bunch of different levels of the game, from travel ball all the way up through Division I college baseball. Been recruiting at all of those different levels as well. But just excited to kind of get together and chat about baseball and kind of our different perspectives on it. I was thinking through everybody's different perspective on baseball as you guys were kind of going through your bios and thinking, man, we cover a lot of ground on what we think about ball. So I think it's going to be some fun discussions, several movie quotes, and anywhere in between. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Love it. Well, thanks, guys.
Kenny, I think you should let everybody know that you were also drafted to play professionally with Kansas City as well. Throw that out there a little bit.
Throw yourself a little bit deeper of an
where you
introduction
played
there.
a little bit too, man.
That's true. So I was fortunate enough to play college baseball and professional baseball a little bit too. Played in the minor leagues for the Kansas City Royals organization. So I have a little bit of insight there, and then played in Charlottesville, Virginia for the Virginia Cavaliers for a couple of years. So I think to to expand off of Robbie's comment, I think we have quite a vast array of knowledge in the baseball world, a lot of different perspectives, as I'm sure you'll hear tonight. We're just looking to talk some baseball, looking to enjoy time together as friends, and this has been something on our minds for a little while now. So with that, we're going to jump right in. First on the list, I want to bring to the forefront everything that's going on in MLB right now. I know we're kind of in the midst of a lockout. Wanted to hear everybody's opinion kind of on the lockout, where we stand. There's a lot of different sides. There's a couple different sides to this, and I feel like a lot of people, fans wise, players wise, and even coaches wise, can have some different opinions. So wanted to hear a little bit about opinions from everybody and just kind of kick this off with, where's everybody see the state of baseball at right now? Are we in a good spot, bad spot? Where do we see ourselves going over the next couple of weeks, especially?
Well, I'll jump in. I've got quite a few thoughts that have been building on my chest here that we finally have put ourselves on a platform to talk about here. So, but in all seriousness, I don't know, man. It's tough to watch. I feel like baseball was on a really good path there for a long time. Obviously not having any type of labor shortage, since the mid 90s, really. We have a breakout season last year from an international superstar in Shohei Ohtani, who's doing things that the sport hasn't seen, since baseball games have been on TV in color. So, so this feels just like a huge speed bump in the road to me in terms of the sport of baseball, and is kind of giving it a little bit of a black eye. And, I think getting older, it's interesting too, because I think I used to look at baseball as a whole, and it's like, well, of course, like the owners have to like win because they're the people that own the teams. But I think at the same time, now having perspective of friends going through it and knowing some folks that are in it, it's, like the players got to be taken care of too, because they're the ones actually putting their bodies on the line every day. And so, just hearing the narratives that are thrown out there from, the league trying to say the players are being selfish and all this stuff and all that, it's pretty wild, man. Like, from what I've seen, coverage wise, it doesn't seem like the players have been too demanding in what they need, but I don't know, man. It's just, I feel like it is kind of like a big speed bump in baseball right now that's not really needed. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, so let me throw this out there because we got Ryan on the podcast, and Ryan, feel free to speak to whatever you can and cannot. But what are some of the roadblocks that the MLB is seeing right now, especially with the two sides of what's it really coming down to? I mean, we talking about money? Are we talking about conditions? Are we talking about what are we talking about here?
We're definitely talking about a lot of money, and I'm talking about like billions of dollars in the bottom line, like especially over the next 5 years that the CBA would cover. So you're talking billions of dollars, like potentially the owners want that expanded playoffs, which those two extra teams that they're between, it's a difference of $100 million on top, just right there from the beginning is $100 million. But then when you're talking about player salaries, is like they're trying to pay their top young talent the least amount as possible so they can afford like one or two stars, but then also pocket the rest of it as well. Like essentially, but then comes down to like they want each and every team to be 100% competitive and field competitive teams and not worried about, oh, like I want to get like a higher draft pick and try to like beef up my farm system. So then, like down the road, like if I wanted to trade a couple of them for like somebody I can, like so they have a beefed up farm system. But now, like by making sure that everybody's competitive, all the way through, that as a whole, baseball becomes more enjoyable to watch as the year goes on. But then also, is like the owners don't want that luxury tax to go any higher because they don't want to pay anymore. They don't want to pay the players anymore. They'll just hover right around that line, and they're not going to pay the players what they're worth. So now with as many young superstars that we have that haven't even hit arbitration or free agency, the players are trying to make sure that those young stars are compensated what they're worth. going into their prime years and try to get them paid in their prime. So then the owners don't get stuck with bad contracts when they're on the decline of their year. They just bust their butts for 6 years, and then now they're going to get told, it's like, oh, you're declining in your career already. But if you look at my 6 years, like, this is what I earned, but they don't want to pay that because they're getting older. So that's like their way of getting out of having to get stuck on these big contracts anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that crazy to think about in the sport of baseball? A team has literal control over a player for more than half of what would probably be considered their prime.
Actually, it's even longer if you think about that. The team controls you for 6 minor league seasons, and then on that 6 minor league season, they put you on the 40-man, and then there's another 3 options that you have on the 40-man. So you might, and then on that, when you're out of options is when you finally stick in the big leagues. Then they have you for another 6 years. So that's like 15 years, like your entire career, and you don't even hit free agency. You could be with one organization and never get that opportunity to flourish with another team. And that's why like the Rule 5 drafts were implemented. So those guys that were roadblocked get another opportunity with somebody else that they were just going to get stuck with on another team. So that's why the Rule 5 draft is very important. But it's also, like, in the grand scheme of things, you can be stuck with one team for 15 years before you even get the option of thinking about playing with another team unless you're traded.
So crazy.
That's tough. So let me throw this out there because this has always been on the forefront of my mind. What would a salary cap do for baseball? Do you guys think it would go in sort of a good direction? I mean, I know one of the biggest things, right? We're trying to play this dichotomy between, these owners are business people, and they're trying to essentially make as much money as they can. They're also trying to produce a winning baseball club, right?
Theoretically,
yes.
But you could make the argument that a ceiling floor or a price floor, a spending floor would be better. I mean, Major League Baseball teams are inherently profitable. I mean, in 10 years, every single one of those teams is going to be vastly more valuable than they were before, even if they're terrible.
And when you have the Dodgers paying Trevor Bauer $45 million a year, and the Orioles' entire salary for their whole team is like 37 or something. I mean, it was something ridiculously low that made no sense. So, that's pretty crazy. Like, how does that exist in a league and it's competitive?
Doesn't every other major sport have a salary cap?
That's correct. Yeah.
So I mean, like, it seems to work pretty well for every other sport.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious, and I think that there would be some, I don't know, there would be some instruments that you have to put in there to make sure that people would actually spend money. But I don't know, like, it just seems like if the Dodgers or the Yankees can't go out and buy 7 players a year, basically, and start their whole starting 9 with free agent picks, essentially. Let's call it what it is. I think the game changes, right? I mean,
sure.
I don't know. I'm thinking back to like 2014, 2015 and obviously I was drafted by the Royals, so I was kind of a part of this. But when the Royals were playing the Giants back-to-back years, I mean, that's a different game 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Whereas, even coming from a huge Braves fan of myself, like, the Braves played the Dodgers the past 2 years in the NLCS. Like, it's the same teams over and over again if they can spend the money to do so. Whereas I think, to Ryan, to your point, you're saying that everyone wants to be competitive. We want to have 30 teams that are competitive throughout Major League Baseball. Let's call it what it is. There's not 30 teams that are competitive. We got the same 8 or 9 teams that are vying for playoff spots at the end of the year. So I feel like, and we can get into this topic too, but I feel like MLB and the commissioner have to get on board and figure out what they actually want and kind of move in that direction.
It brings up a good point, because, like, if you have, like, I joke about how bad the Orioles are, but, like, it actually, even as somebody that really likes to follow him and is really a big fan of him, what it does is it dampens your interest to a point, because if every team is losing or you're not competitive, there's only so much interest you can give to it. It's going to become, just boring and just kind of depressing. So if you want to talk about, growing the game and reaching more people, the more competitive your teams are, the more likely that's going to happen.
And
also, like when
go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
Also, like when you have more competitive, like when you have like teams that are constantly losing 100 games a year, nobody's going to want to go to those games either. So it's like when the owners are like crying so much, is that like, and then people always say that, or the fans always say that we're the ones that pay your salary. It's not really that true. When teams probably, I would say, I don't know the number exactly, but it's probably at least 60% of their revenue is all on TV anyway. So it's not really matter. Like at that point, it's almost like they don't really care if people come to the games anyway. But also when you have like teams that aren't winning, like, yeah, your tickets are going to be a lot cheaper, but like nobody's really going to want to go watch a team that's lost 100, 110 games every season either.
Yeah.
You listen
unless the Yankees or Red Sox or Dodgers or whoever are coming into town, then they want to see them.
Yeah, you listen to like an Orioles broadcast. The broadcasters are literally surprised when there are people in the stands. They're like, "Oh, well, we actually got like 10,000 today, guys. Like this is pretty." I mean, they're literally open about it.
Yeah.
Kenny, to piggyback your salary cap, I mean, you got all these teams with so much money, and then teams that don't. What salary cap to? Let's say you give the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Red Sox, those guys a salary cap. Now you got all this extra money, supposedly, right? What would that take to funnel that down to maybe the minor league system and help out those guys in minor league systems? Because we all know from hearing from you, hearing from Ryan, me hearing from Connor, who plays with the Orioles, the minor leagues. I mean, it's rough, dude. If you get out of the minor leagues, it's good living. Or I mean, living out of a suitcase isn't great, but it's a lot better than riding buses all the time.
Well, yeah. So this is my argument too, right? So if you have a salary cap, I just feel like there should be more money funneled into the minor league system, right? The hard part that I have, and obviously I have a different kind of, probably a different track, if you would call it that. Like at UVA, I was preached to every day in and out, team. Like we're a team. We're trying to win the College World Series. We're trying to do this. We're trying to do that as a team, right? It's never individual. But I don't know if Ryan can attest to this as well. But sitting in the locker room after you lose 5-2 in Greensboro, North Carolina, and you got Joe Schmo from the Dominican Republic who's all excited because he went 2 for 4 with a bomb and a double. And he's all excited because he did well. That's a different aspect of baseball that I don't think a lot of people realize. And then to expand off that even further, you're asking that individual kid, when he progresses through the system, once he gets called up to the big leagues, then you're asking him to flip a switch and say, "Hey man, now it's time to produce for the team. Now we're going to add the team aspect back in and try to like have you be a team player." I just think there's this kind of very big differential between what we're trying to preach at the minor league level, then once you're getting to the major league level and what that looks like. I think that look, money boils down to everything, right? And so
Correct.
These guys are trying to make a bottom line, but I don't know, throw some incentive contracts in there for these guys, make them less than 7 years so that when you come out of either high school or college or the Dominican Republic, you're not signing a 7-year deal. Maybe you're signing a 4-year deal. Maybe you're signing a 3-year deal. There's some incentives in there. You hit over 275 for your rookie ball year, you get you get a $10,000 bonus. That goes a long way for these kids to try to promote kind of team or individual statistics that I think could really benefit the game and grow the game rather than just bringing in mass amounts of people in and out and flushing them through the system and seeing what pops out on the other end.
Yeah. So Ryan, what's kind of like I know the players over the years have been pretty objective to the salary cap. Is that because the players feel like that limits these major contracts that the Bryce Harpers and the Fernando Tatises are signing, these 10-year, $350 million deals? Like, what can you kind of like give us a little bit of that side of it as to like what's the issue of not having a salary cap?
Not having a salary cap essentially does not limit your players. Sometimes with the salary cap, it kind of like limits what your player can make. Like you're kind of putting a cap on how much a player is worth. So like now without it, like your player can get what he's probably really deserving at a market value. And then also like the owners probably would hover right around that salary cap, and then whatever they make is all going to go in their pocket because they don't have to, like there would have to be rules about them having to put that money, whatever they make, back into the farm system, but there are no rules in place of that because the players union does not work for the minor leaguers themselves. So like that's the only difference is the minor leaguers are not unionized underneath the Major League Baseball. Like they're just separate. They're just pretty much like I would just call them workers for the owners. And that's essentially that's what Walker Buehler said. The same thing is like this is like a worker, like we're all workers fighting against our owner and our employer. So that's essentially what like it. And then the minor leaguers are like even below like the worker level.
So
but they're not covered in anything.
What prevents that though? What prevents the minor leagues from getting involved in that union? Just because it's
unions cost a lot of money. It's a separate entity, and it costs a lot of money just for like major league dues themselves. Like are a lot of money. So like, there's no way any minor leaguer can afford like that at all. So like that's why, because like you're paying for people covering, like making sure like all the like the travel's covered, all the legal issues, and putting aside for in case there is a lockout or a strike. Like it pays for health insurance as well, so you're covered for a couple of years. So like the Players Association puts money aside just for in any of these instances over that 5-year span of a CBA, and minor leaguers just can't afford like any of those costs like legally. So that's why like it's hard for them to form like a union to protect themselves.
Well, and that's where Major League was pretty smart in their setup, right? Because like the minor league system is an entirely separate entity. It's MILB. It's not MLB. It's an entirely separate organization. And I guess that's where it gets a little like, I guess that's where the lines gray a little bit, right? Because, the owner of the Atlanta Braves isn't the owner of the AAA Gwinnett Snipers, or whatever,
Yeah.
So I guess that's where it gets challenging is like all of these minor league teams have their own individual owners, but they're not nearly to the level of wealth that the major league, parent companies are at owner wise. So, I mean, that's an interesting dichotomy. And, I get the players, idea of it limiting that value, but that argument a little bit to me feels like we are catering to the top 1% of the Major League Baseball talent pool and, not seeing a huge benefit to the rest of the 99% of the players. Like I'm all for Fernando Tatis getting a $330 million 12-year deal. Like, I think that's fantastic. I think he's great for the game. I think he's a huge talent, but I mean, those guys fighting for spot 25 and 26 on the roster. Like, if we can do something in an agreement to where those guys are getting $1 million minimum salary, if they do succeed and make that team, like that's life-changing for them.
That's where like the players now are fighting to increase that minimum. Because when you look at all the other major sports, is like Major League Baseball has the lowest minimum out of all of them. It's like these guys play double the games and getting way less. So like from now, it's like they're trying to protect the future generations of those guys that come up through the minors and work their butt off to get up there, that they're able to make that life-changing money. And even if it's only for 1 or 2 seasons, like that is life-changing money for anybody, even if just for that short amount of time. So they're working now more to protect the future generations of this game, probably than they have more so than they have in the past.
And I think you have to, because how many major league guys this year, their salary was under $2 million? I would probably say
95% of them.
Yeah, 95% of the Major League Baseball this year, their salary was under $2 million. I mean, you have your Bryce Harpers, your Mike Trouts, your Kershaws, those guys that they're going to make their money. But I mean, when most of your game, and I mean, most of the game now is what, your early 20s, mid 20s. I mean, those guys don't have the opportunity. I mean, what are we doing here? Which also goes into the whole marketing the game and why there's people that don't know who these people are because Major League Baseball doesn't market worth crap.
Yeah.
Aren't we just describing trickle down economics here basically? Like if we put a salary cap in place, that I understand that there would have to be rules and that would kind of force the teams to spend the money, but I think that would be a relatively easy thing to put in place. But yeah, we're just talking about if you cap the amount that you can give at the top, that's trickle down economics. It's going to trickle down to the lower levels, and eventually that money gets invested into higher minimum salaries and better just living conditions and whatnot for the minor league. So it feels like that would be something that would be beneficial to everybody.
Yes. So Barrick, to expand on that a little bit, because I heard this nonstop when I was playing, and obviously I'm a little bit far removed. So Ryan could probably add on to this a little bit more. But what I've heard is that the MLB, the Players Association on that side wants to see those salaries creep up more and more and more, because what happens is as they creep up, so does the bottom level, right? Mm-hmm. And that's true, but we're just leaving this gap of Bryce Harper's making $100,000 million every year, and then everybody kind of creeping up, but we're leaving the whole minor league system behind, where we're not bringing everyone up, and so I think what the trickle down effect that you're talking about is essentially would benefit the entire organization and the entire profitability of MLB and MILB.
Because I don't think it would just stay with the players too. I think you would be looking at, again, that money would make its way to facilities and advertising eventually. I mean, I think it would kind of go everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I walked into a minor league clubhouse in I don't know, Wilmington, Delaware, where I get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich as my meal pregame. Like, come on, these guys are trying to play and compete at the highest level, and we can't give them a meal that's substantial enough for them to even play in a game. I mean, if you and I were to go try to compete, that's the last meal I would ever want to have trying to compete at the highest level of any sport, regardless of whether it's baseball. So
especially if they're using grape jelly.
Exactly.
Hey, no free ads, but let's not knock on the Uncrustables. That's like a top 5 snack of all time. So,
but I mean, you can close that gap, man. I mean, they're talking about eliminating more minor leaguers to save money, I guess you would say. But the more you eliminate the lower levels, the larger that gap gets, and then the product that they put on the field, that they put on TV, becomes worse and worse and worse. And now they're going to reflect on their own dealings of what they do. They're going to make their bed and lay in it. And I mean, these guys, they're going to want all this money, but if their product sucks, who's going to watch the product?
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think to your point too, Kenny, you mentioned that Bryce Harper divide, right? And you've all of a sudden got Bryce Harper up here all the way at the ceiling, and then you talked about the minor leagues, but there's a huge divide just on the Philadelphia Phillies. You've got Bryce Harper making $38-39 million a year, and you've got a guy in his second year who's making $625 maybe. It's and that's just on that team. But then let alone that, you may have a guy that's been in the league for 8 years making 1.2, 1.3. Again, I think that goes to Ryan's point of you could have a guy, let's just say he's in year 6. That's his last arbitration year. And let's say he's had a decent career. Again, he's probably arbitration getting $2 million maybe. And that's if he's had a good, statistical, seasons to back that up. So, I don't know, that it's fascinating in the world. And, I've heard that analogy too of every agent's out there trying to get the next big contract because it sets up the next big contract. So when they're negotiating, they're all the time using the benchmark, of that last contract. And that's where, listening to Trevor Bauer's agent, Rachel Luba on, TikTok and Twitter and all that stuff, that's why their deal was so crazy, because he's able to renegotiate that deal almost every year. So it's like he can reset that table every single year. And
see, as a
don't
general fan, I hate that, because like, just because you're the next person up for a contract doesn't mean you're worth that
100%.
amount of money. Like, it's just so frustrating when, and you see it in every sport. You see it with quarterbacks in football too. It's just like, just because I'm next doesn't mean that I'm actually worth a bump in pay.
But like, it's hard to ask somebody
like that money or back.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard, but it's hard to ask the next guy up to be the martyr and die on the stake, right? And be like, I'm going to be the one to change this. Like, I can't say that if I was in that position and my agent was sitting here telling me that, I'm going to get to play baseball next year and make $45 million a year. Like, okay, like, how fast can I sign that contract? Like,
no, I think it comes down more to the owners, and they're just,
agreed.
They need to. I'm not saying they should do this, but it's one option is to just kind of make a stand and say, listen, no, we're not gonna just keep this escalation. You're right, Scott. If you're a player, it's awesome. Like, why wouldn't you? It's beautiful. But it just, from a general, like, not taking sides with players or owners, just from a general kind of fan standpoint, it's almost comical, because it's just like, all right, let's, who's the next guy that we've never heard of that's going to get a giant contract just because he's next? And I feel like, that's on the owners to kind of stop that cycle.
Well, so I'll add on to this. Do you think, I don't know if you guys read Mark Appel's tweets on some of this stuff and his kind of solutions to what could be solutions to the minor league issue. But, if I'm a business person, what am I looking for, right? I'm looking to make money. I'm also looking to make my team the best team. I'm trying to create a dynasty, right? And so if I'm trying to do those things, why am I putting the people that are going to be the next wave coming into my system at the detriment of, let's just call it what it is, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, ham sandwiches every day on the road, rather than, he made the argument, these guys have all this money, pay $270,000 and have a chef for them to follow them around and provide the nutrition that they need to be successful, right? Then it's on them to be successful, and then it's on them to produce on the field, rather than saying, you know what, we spent the least amount of money we could. We paid basically $5 a day for these guys to eat, essentially, per person. That's the way it is, and I'll live with the consequences on the back end. It just seems a little bit ludicrous to me, just to make an extra buck or two down the line.
Yeah,
I think it also depends on those meals, Kenny, of what organization you're in too. I mean, you got your bottom feeders and then you've got your top tiers, and I think both have different aspects. I mean, I have a friend that played in the Dodgers, and Ryan played with him in Oakland, Seth Frankoff, and they said that the difference in meals were night and day, and you could tell that they actually cared about their upper level, like their AAA, AA guys versus other organizations that, PB&J, that was their go-to pregame, postgame, whatever meal. Yeah. And I mean, I know Ryan and you can attest to different types of places, different types of meals when you would get what you would get. So
Sure. Yeah.
I think we're being a little harsh on PB&J. I'm just gonna throw that.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, I mean, I'm a personal PB and hold the J. I don't need a J. Just give me the PB.
Look, man, when you've had about, I don't know, 140 PB&Js for 5 straight years before a game, you let me know how you feel after that.
I seriously think you underestimate the amount of Uncrustables I've chowed down on in my life.
Dude,
hey, don't worry, Scotty. My fantasy team this year was called the Uncrustables, and it did win a title, so I can say it is top notch.
That's what I'm saying.
True.
That's what I'm saying.
Post-traumatic stress, Kenny. I'm getting a stress dream about all of our trips to Golden Corral when we were in junior college.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm gonna have
too much.
Exactly. I feel like I'm gonna have to get a counselor or something like that for this.
Hey, I mean, what other restaurant can you go get 7 5-ounce ribeye steaks in one meal, though?
Exactly.
Like, answer me that question.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. You're joking about Golden Corral, but I will go out on a limb. I would have gladly taken Golden Corral over some PB&Js, to be quite honest with you, every day of the week. I could have gone and gotten my salad. I could have gotten some steak. I could have gotten whatever I wanted. At least I
Let's
have
be
some
honest;
options there.
those minor league clubhouses didn't have the indoor plumbing to account for that. So
Probably true. Probably true.
bunch of high protein diets right there, Scotty.
Somebody's got to.
not enough fiber.
What do you? Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of shift gears just a tad bit. What do you guys think of Rob Manfred? I know that we've had some interesting combos on texts, and I'm interested to hear everybody's point of view. Do we think he's the right figurehead as the commissioner for MLB? And I'll leave this up to anyone who wants to jump in. I know that some of us may or may not be able to speak to this, but I'll leave it at that and see what people say.
He seems like a shithead.
What are you doing? A thumbs vote, Drew? We're just gonna go around and say
I'm pulling up a New York Mets right here. It's a thumbs down, man. It's awful. It's he's not doing anything to help the game, and everything he says he wants to grow the game. Prove it. When has he proven that he wants to grow the game?
I don't think he likes baseball.
I don't either.
Yeah,
he likes money.
Yeah,
and the owners are helping him get that.
Yeah,
I'll be honest. Like, I don't know a ton about his background, but like, he worked in the league office for quite a while, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that means anything. So don't listen to what I'm not saying. But at the same time, like, I agree though. Like, I mean, for goodness sakes, the commissioner of your league calls the trophy a piece of metal. What are we doing? What are we doing?
He should have been fired that day.
Holy cow! Like, I don't know, man. I will put my hand up and say I haven't done enough research on him as a person, but I mean, the evidence of the game isn't really growing. I mean, the blackout situation when it comes to like trying to watch baseball games, like, you cannot stand behind a podium and tell me you're trying to grow the game and you've got half of the daggum country can't watch a game because it's blacked out due to MLB restrictions. Like, what are we doing? Like, if you want 12-year-old kids to watch, like, and their family can't afford to take them to the ballpark, like, they've got to have a way to watch the game. Like, they just have to.
Especially in this day and age of streaming where you have so many different options to access stuff. It's
everybody
ridiculous
has one of these at their fingertips.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that there's like even blackouts at all. Like, most of the other sports have gotten rid of it, but yeah, you try and find a baseball game and it's just like, it's not going to happen.
Scott, you sound like you're still salty that you can't stream the Braves on the MLB TV app from Boone, North Carolina.
I mean, look, just because you live in a geographic, and I'm going to use this term loosely, footprint, like, what are we even like? And I think that's what frustrates me the most is, like, if it made sense, like, if there were clear boundaries, I think it would be fine. But like, sometimes you can be in like Tennessee and all of a sudden you're in the Braves blackout footprint. Like,
the Orioles were blacked out for me multiple times. I'm in Louisiana.
Exactly. Like, what are we doing?
So correct me if I'm wrong. This sounds like Manfred is a yes man, and he's been saying yes for about 10 years now, and now it's all coming to bite him in the ass, and he's not really sure how to handle it all, and he's just throwing his hands up like, whatever, somebody else and whoever the next commissioner is going to deal with it. And that's just how I feel. I mean, it's because these things don't make sense, right? We're all pretty smart individuals, and you can see the writing on the wall. This guy ain't going to last much longer. And when we're looking at that, it's just one of those things that I said yes to this, and this, and now I'm just totally toast, and I've got to figure out a way just to kind of suffer through. And as a fan, we have to suffer through now from that. Unfortunately,
so who's the right guy?
Kenny Swab.
There we go.
Well, so, I hear, like, just for the sake of conversation, like, I'll play devil's advocate for just 1 second. Okay. It is my understanding that, yes, the commissioner of any league, NFL, MLB, NBA, they have a duty to grow the game, put the game in a good light, that kind of stuff, right? Like, I think we can all agree to that. But ultimately, at the same time, like, aren't they also like the league rep for the owners? Like, aren't they kind of like the person? So like at the end of the day, like they do have to somewhat be a little biased towards the owners because they work for the owners, technically speaking. So like, I'm not going to sit here and say like a lot, like everything that he's done is completely like doesn't make sense. I think he's done a lot of things that the owners are probably very happy with. But when you also on the same talking head try to say that you're trying to grow the game and you have the game's best interest, like that's where I think we all have the issues, because what he does and says doesn't always back that up.
Agreed.
Can't do it all. You can't do it all. You got to do the job, and he tries to fence it. And I think I think it was you, Kenny, that said, yes, man. I think that's true. I think if you're going to sit on a fence and try to say one thing, then you need to be able to back it up. And I think he's not done a great job of that. Obviously, the ongoing negotiations between the players and and Major League Baseball, and actually Major League Baseball locking out their own players, is kind of a really good example of the goodwill or lack thereof between the two parties. And if your players can't get together with your team, your ownership, then it's not healthy for the game.
Sure.
Period. That's what I think.
What about this as an idea of like fixing it, to Barrick's point, like somebody being in the right space? So like the players have the MLB Players Association, right? That's somebody, they represent the players in that facet. What if, like, why can't there be somebody that does that for the owners? There's an owner representative and they all meet, but the commissioner is an unbiased third party. Like, they sit in that seat for the sake of growing the game and doing the things that are needed. And then when you have these situations like labor agreements and lockouts and stuff like that, now you have the MLB players reps come together. You have the owners and the owners rep come together. And really at that point, you have a built-in mediator of the commissioner sitting in that chair, and he can kind of help facilitate a lot of that stuff. Like, is that something that's doable and viable to happen? I don't know.
I don't see why not.
Yeah, we say that now. Yeah, I don't think that's going to ever happen. But hey,
I don't either.
I think at this point it's worth a try, right? I don't know. It's worth a try.
Like, let's throw this hypothetical out for just a quick second, because it is a podcast and we can do it. What if Rob Manfred vacated his position as Major League Baseball commissioner and became the owner representative? And then one Ken Griffey Jr. steps into the league commissioner chair, and he's a former player. He knows the game. He knows what that's about. Now, again, that could throw in the fact of being biased because he was a player. But like, what would that do to the game?
What if you instead of going King Griffey Jr., let's go a guy that's played the game, that's a Hall of Famer, but is also an owner now, as in Derek Jeter.
So I'm all for
now he's on both sides.
Yeah, I'm all
it's not a very long list. It's not a very long list of people.
Yeah,
who have that unique perspective. And Jeter's got enough dealing with down there in Miami right now. So I don't know. I don't know if there's that many people who could do something like that, and without what Scotty's talking about, some inherent bias, one way or the other. Like, obviously, King Griffey Jr. is going to have a huge bias towards players. But
I think we should consider Pete Rose.
No, I think to your point, it's a great.
He's got no love for anybody.
I just don't know who's pulling the strings, right? I think that there's somebody else pulling the strings here, and regardless of whether it's Jeter, regardless of whether it's Manfred, shucks, man, we can put Roger Goodell in there. I just don't. I think somebody's pulling the strings and figuring out, like, not that I'm suggesting we put Goodell as the MLB commissioner. What I'm just saying is,
Raj,
somebody's pulling the strings and somebody's doing something, and these guys, their hands are tied. Like, honestly, like if you put Rob Manfred aside, I doubt very seriously that he would say that the things he is doing are the right things for Major League Baseball. If you took him off the record, if you took everything out of play, I doubt that he would say that. I'd be shocked if he did. I just doubt that he would.
He may be delusional. Like, he may actually think that he's like doing. I wouldn't be surprised. I guess either way, but
there's a lot of people in high-powered positions that are pretty much delusional at this point. But I guess what I'm saying is like it's one of those things that like I just don't know. I would love to know where we actually stand on that front. You know what I mean? Like I would love to know what's actually going on, because for us as the casual fans, the aggressive fans, whatever you want to call it, like we have different opinions and we see different things, and it doesn't make sense to me, especially of what's actually going on. If that makes sense.
I don't know if anybody else is keeping score. I don't know if anybody else is keeping score, but Kenny Swab with the first political undertone statement of the podcast. So there you go.
That I don't know. That could have been mentioned at multiple other avenues rather than just politics. I don't know what you're talking about, Robbie.
Yeah. Where do you live? Just a random question.
Undisclosed information. Here's my question though. Like, getting off of Manfred's, situation for a second. Can we talk about these two sides have met 10 to 12 times at this point. They're sitting in a room for like 8 hours. What in God's name are they talking about?
I was wondering the same thing.
They're not.
It's hard for me to be in the same room as like a couple people for that long, let alone 8 to 12 different times. What are we talking about at this point? Like
they're not talking because they know that they're so far apart that they just don't want to talk to each other. I mean, it's like fighting with a significant other. I think Trevor May talked about that on Chris Rose's show this week or last week, and it's like
I think they're all just sending each other text messages.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You're talking to each other through text message, all in group chats, and they're in like a big firm meeting, and you got your buddies that you group chat with during the big meeting, and you laugh about and you talk about other people, and I mean, they're not talking about anything because there's no common ground that they're going to, or at least that's what it seems like. I don't see there's any way they're going to find a common ground before tomorrow.
No. Yeah, I think they're just saying, like, you guys want to hang out with Tiger Woods tonight or not? So
what do you want for lunch?
Exactly.
Let's go around the horn and see what everybody thinks the over/under is going to be on number of games played this year for Major League Baseball. I think it's going to be 140.
Well, wait, are you going to set the over/under as 140 and 140 and a half? And we're all going to say over/under.
Let's do 147 and a half. So 15 games.
All right, that's fair. So
I'm taking the under.
Under.
You're talking 2 weeks of missed season, basically.
I'm taking the under.
2.5.
I'm with Barrick. Under.
2.5.
Yeah.
You think they're going under 147 and a half?
Under.
Yep.
I'm going to say, just to spite you guys, I'm going to say over. Because
I'm taking the over. I'm taking the over.
All right. The two guys that know what's going on are going over.
Well, this is probably also going to depend on how quickly they think they can get spring training off and once it starts.
They need, from what I'm hearing, they need 4 weeks, because 3 weeks when they did the COVID season, they didn't think 3 weeks was long enough because they had ample injuries. So they're thinking 1 more week. So I think they need 4 weeks of spring training, because I know most guys think spring training is too long anyways, but I think they need 4 weeks before you start games. So I'm still going to lean towards under 147 and a half.
And I think this probably brings up a better topic for next time. But like then we, for episode 2, we should talk about if this is, is that necessarily a bad thing? The number of games, being reduced maybe on a permanent basis.
Well, so this was going to throw me into my next topic for us, and I think that I have some great theories on this. So I'd love to get into more of an in-depth conversation on this. I absolutely hate that there are 162 games in baseball. I agree that it's been this way for a very, very long time, but I would much rather see a longer postseason and us see more teams get in the postseason than that, and love to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
It's too long.
I'm
I
sure
love
that.
baseball. I don't care
Well,
how
yeah, I
long
love
it is. They
baseball
could play
too, but
thousands of games, and I would
I,
love
I
watching
think
it.
I think from being around Ryan and knowing what he dealt with, I'm pretty sure that they could still have the same length of season. But I don't know, Ryan. Wouldn't you enjoy a couple more off days here and there? I mean,
Well, that's
and cut
where
down your
like they've
games.
come in the past, like the last CBA and like over the past year, they've already negotiated in more off days. So, like the technical like full baseball season is 183 days. So and then a service time is 172. So you get 172 days out of essentially 183 days of a full baseball season. So like you're still 20 some off days that are included in that whole span. But honestly, probably like one or two more wouldn't be the baddest. Like wouldn't be the worst to add in. But also like going into the shortening the spring training is like at this point in the off season, the only people that need some time to ramp up are your starters, and going into that, like they're probably already building up their pitch counts anyway. So it's all about just facing hitters and then doing like a sim game to be even ready by the game, so they could shorten their spring training that way. Already, like just guys already just do it upon themselves to just build up and be ready at that point. So you could still see a 3 week spring training be guys will be more prepared for that going into it now.
That's fair.
I think what we'll need to
I mean,
I think a player we should watch out for is several of the Atlanta Braves infielders, because they all played 162 games in a full length postseason, all the way to Game 6 of the World Series. So I think Dansby Swanson played like 193-ish games. Or I
Same with
remember
Freddie.
listening to that somewhere. Same with Freddie. Same with Austin Riley. All those guys who were in there. Ozzy, I think it was over a few games, but it'll be interesting to see what their performance is like following that, because that's so abnormal for most of Major League Baseball players.
well, so riddle me this. My thoughts are I'd love to see a 140 game season, 142 game season, and I'd love to add on more teams to the playoffs. I thoroughly despise this one game playoff to get into the playoffs. It's so you're telling me that you send a guy like Ryan out there to compete in 162 games, and you're saying that depending on how the season shook out, right? Let's just call it for it. Like let's say Ryan's our number one, and he had to throw in game 162 because we were in a pennant race and we had to win that game to go to the next round to go to the play-in game to the playoffs. And now I can't throw my number one against the I don't know the Brewers number one or whoever it may be. And why is that fun? Why is that the best team winning, or why is that the best team making it on to the next round?
It's not, and it cheapens the regular season, because it comes down
Yeah.
to the single game, which means that okay, most of the regular season then doesn't really matter. And so yeah, I totally agree. It's a dumb system. It doesn't make any sense. And yeah, it would be better to I feel like it'd be better to shorten the regular season and expand the playoff like one more round, so that you get like I mean, let's be honest, playoff baseball is a ton of fun. It's it's so exciting. There's nothing wrong with making it a little bit larger, and like I said, maybe decreasing the regular season a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's baseball is all meant to be played in series, anyways. Even down like now to the high school level, we play 2 games a week. I wish our playoffs would go, best of 3 for each round, because then the true team wins. Not just you don't just get dominated by one dominant arm each round, or the second round you don't have a good second arm and another team does, and they take care of you. Major League Baseball, why should it be any different? They play 3-4 game series every week.
Yeah.
The World Series 7 games, the Divisional Series 7 games, the everything's then 5 games. I mean, if you're going to do a play-in game, do a play-in series. Go best of 3.
Yeah,
Go
just
best
do
of
best
3.
of 3. Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't. I mean,
No,
why would
it's
you
more,
change everything?
Well, it's more revenue for the owners. I mean,
Exactly. So why wouldn't they change it?
Exactly. You get in the playoffs and like you get to host a playoff series. You know, you're not going to host it anyways, regardless if you're the underdog. But if you get to at least go to the 3-game series, it's two minimum, three more than likely revenue options for you.
Well, and I think that's what you're going to have issues with the owners, though, when we're talking about reducing regular season games. You know, I don't know what the number is, you know, but let's just call it 40,000, 50,000 per regular season game these guys lose out on. You all of a sudden cut out 22 games from the regular season. You're looking at, you know, almost $1 million of revenue that they're going to take away. And let's say, you know, again, and what are you going to, how many teams are you going to put in the playoffs now? Like, are we going to have 10 out of the 15 teams from each conference? Because, like, to me, like, I'm not about everybody makes the playoffs. Like, so that's where I like struggle with our playoff expansion. Like, you know, I don't think every team deserves to be in the playoffs just because they made it to the end of the season. Like, you know, we're not in Little League Baseball where all of a sudden, you know, the 2-14 team gets to go just because they were in the league, you know, like, so that's where I really struggle with that debate. Like, you know, I do think it can be shortened. You know, I think it's just a matter of finding what that magic number is to make the owners happy. So I would see like 150. That sounds reasonable to me. That's 12 games. And, you know, what are we at playoff wise now? 6 teams. You know, I think maybe if you expand it to 8, I mean, I
think there's a happy medium. When I say 140, that was really just to get to, you know, to Ryan's point with 183 days essentially in the season. If you shorten that to 150, maybe even 152 games, you're really only losing 5 games of revenue for your home team, right? You're losing 10 games total, 5 games of revenue for your home team. And then, I think you add in 8 teams to the playoff, and I think you add in series, two sets of 3-game series, and then a 5 and a 7, and then that's the way that the league should go. I mean, 8 out of 15 on each side get into the playoffs after 152 games. After 150 games, every other sport does that. Hockey does that. Basketball does that. I mean, geez Louise, dude, LeBron's going to go finish 8 games under 500 this year, and he's somehow going to miraculously make the playoffs and make a run. Like.
That's, I think, on that point, that's why the players don't want to expand the playoffs to that many teams, because then you got a team that's content with being under 500. Come trade deadline, there's like, oh, we don't need to add anything. We'll be just happy just making it to the postseason. It's like you take away the competitiveness by allowing that many teams. So like nobody's going to really care if like this team that just barely snuck in is in, because we already know they're not going to, it's just like they're just taking up space when you want teams like how it was like in previous years where coming down the stretch, like you have 4 or 5 teams battling for maybe 1 or 2 spots. I think that's where they probably enjoyed and thrived more than having teams that probably don't need that, just sneak in the playoffs, that probably don't even need to be in the playoffs and didn't do anything to better their team, making trades to be competitive when it comes to the playoffs. They're just, they feel like it's good enough to just get by and just sneak into the playoffs and be happy with it instead of actually trying to play for a championship.
Sure. I 100% agree with that. But the only argument on the flip side of that was, if you look at last year, I just pulled up last year's standings. The 3 teams on both sides that would have gotten in would have been Toronto, Seattle, and Oakland. Oakland finished 10 games above 500. They would have gotten into the playoffs with an 8-team format. And the other 3 teams on the NL side were Cincinnati, Philadelphia, and San Diego. They were not great teams, but to add in, like, it, to me, it seems like it seems like kind of a
travesty.
Thank you. That Toronto, Seattle, and Oakland didn't get in, and they were 10 games or more over 500. I mean, you're looking at like Toronto was 20 games over 500, and they did not get in the playoffs. Like, that's kind of a joke, in my opinion.
So, like, if you look back, like, I guess I'll pose this question just from like the viewer standpoint. So, the 2020 shortened COVID season, right? I was the end of that regular season so fun and exciting because there were only 40 or 50 games, and that's why it was like fun for those teams to be vying for that spot? Or is adding that extra couple teams, does it inherently make that playoff run even more exciting? Because now you've got seeding implications, right? Because now you're not just vying for spots 4, 5, and 6. Like you're vying, because you've got the 3 division winners, they're guaranteed, but now you've got 5 playoff spots up for grabs. So does that inherently just make the end of the season more exciting, even if you've got a San Diego team that's reeling at the end of the season? Like, is that still exciting that their last games may, I don't know, like that.
I think
it's
always better when games mean more. Like, I mean, we can make it that as simple as that. Like, it's just, it's always going to be better for viewership. There's going to be things for national, sports talk radio to talk about. I mean, when there's drama or some kind of meaningful race, that's how you start to grow the game a little bit. You get people interested in that.
Sure.
Well, and the other question you could ask about that is, were those teams so excited to get in because they knew a 3-game series was waiting them once they got in? Because you have to remember that year, that's how they did it. They did the 3-game series in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking back at it and just, sure, it would have been great to see, I'm trying to think here, trying to piece it together. San Francisco, San Diego in a 3-game matchup. It would have been Milwaukee versus Philadelphia in a 3-game matchup. It would have been the Atlanta versus Cincinnati in a 3-game matchup, and it would have been Dodgers and St. Louis in a 3-game matchup. Like, those are all great 3-game sets that I'm sure that any fan of either of those teams would have loved to have seen. And yet we were I wouldn't say robbed of the opportunity, but we just didn't have that opportunity because we're so fixated on having these 1-game playoffs to get into the actual playoffs. It just kind of seems very convoluted, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I just think back to that 2020 season, man. It was exciting.
It's like, from a player's side, it's like, I know why they don't want to give the owners like that expanded, those few extra teams when it comes to playoff and how the playoff shares are divided. That's like been also another big issue, or that in the past, of how, like, why the owners want it is because they're going to make more money, because the players are only, like, the owners are taking about 70, probably a good like 60% of like the revenue in total, and the players are left to split it between all of themselves. So like the owner, that's where the players, like, because the players don't get paid any salary in the playoffs. It's just all based off of the playoff shares. That's all that they get, where the owners are getting paid essentially the entire season on top of like all of the national media and like all that as well. So they're making more money per game than the players are when it comes to the playoffs. So that's why they want as many teams as possible.
Fair.
Touche.
Yeah, I see it both ways.
And now we're sitting here talking about money again.
What does it all boil down to, boys? Cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining the First to Third podcast. I'm Kenny Swab, and alongside Scott, Barrick, Robbie, Ryan, and Drew. We appreciate your time, and we'll be back next week with an even better podcast. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Peace.